For the NIO global community, I did a shortened version of this video because a lot of people still don't seem to have the awareness of what I talked about a couple of times in these recent videos, the relevance and importance of 100 million shares traded of NIO stock on a single day. But let me just show you what that looks like. For example, today, and I waited until after the market was closed to do this video. There's a lot more we'll cover, but briefly, I wanted to highlight this. Over 152 million shares traded as of my recording time. Again, I stated I'm recording this after the market is closed, and what we saw was an over 16% move up for the stock price. This is consistent with what we've seen in the last few quarters, where even with the spiking FTDs, and perhaps in part because of the spiking FTDs, the big volume days are when we see NIO stock move up, but we haven't had a lot of those big volume days. So if we do see that come back into play, I'm going to zoom out here as I talk about this, and we'll look at the whole history of the stock. One of the things that we saw was hundreds of millions of shares being traded in this time frame, where there was probably a short squeeze that happened on NIO stock. And so not only with the big daily trade volume, the dropping off of the FTDs, which, as you see, they have been elevated in these last few years as the stock prices come back down. But really, as we inch and move each day, I think closer to profitability for the company and the stock, the short thesis eventually, I believe, will get crushed. And at some point, I won't be surprised if we see a continuation with more big moves. So the single easiest indicator to track in the short term is that daily trade volume. And that's why I continue to keep it and will have it remain at the bottom of the screen on the ticker. Also, this is a tweet that I put out there. I don't post a lot on Twixter, but because I'm mostly there for research purposes, but this is one that I put out there, and I said maybe NIO earnings in late March. You know, my thinking was, earlier, I thought it would be early in the month of March, but then I saw that Xiaopeng and Li Auto were going to report kind of mid-month. And so then I thought, well, maybe NIO will wait until they're done and then go after that. And now we've got the update on that over here on the NIO website. NIO will do their fourth quarter and full year 2024 earnings conference call. That will be March 21st, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So just heads up for those who didn't know about that. Also, I had a great question in the comments section and I haven't responded to it, so I wanted to address it right here. I mentioned how the NIO site is looking sharper and cleaner and better than ever. And I also mentioned that I think part of the reason for this is NIO focusing more on global expansion. They have been wanting to do this. Now, there was what I'll just call a FUD article, or some misinformation or misrepresentation that was put out by someone who I don't consider a credible source. And so with that being out there and seeing people talk about maybe NIO not wanting to go global, I think the misnomer is the scaling, and the key it actually becomes for the global markets and regions is the adoption of, oops, see now, this is how fancy it is. I can't even keep on the same page here. This is the new updated kind of refreshed NIO website where you've got Firefly and Onvo brand sites, the sub brands, and the key for the sub brands, not just because of the affordability, but the affordability globally with battery as a service. And with that, I think what becomes really important is the power swap station build out and infrastructure, because that's where you can get the best pricing optionality as a user or consumer in whatever global markets we're talking about. So looking ahead, I think that is what's important. Also, right here, global business. When we click on that, there are a couple of things that NIO is doing. So they are clearly looking to go global. And so I think the question is that word that was put in there of scaling, and what does that mean? Well, I think what's going to happen is NIO is going to expand to the regions, the countries, the areas where it's easier for them to do the power swap infrastructure, where they can then offer the more affordable battery as a service optionality for the users. I think it's really smart. But I love that they are doing this on their site. And I think this is what I'm paying attention to, rather than the noise and the FUD and the misinformation that is sadly being put out there, even by folks who cater or try to keep their clickbaity type material in front of the NIO community. So anyway, I hope that that answers the question. I'm not concerned at all about NIO with the global market. I do think market awareness in China still needs to improve for NIO and for the sub brands, but I think the sub brands are the big indicator for how the global markets will receive and adopt and accept NIO. So, you know, with their sub brands. And so my thinking is it's power swap stations. Where are those located? That will be easier for the creative flexibility and optionality for the users in those markets to accept the other models, the other brands, and that sort of thing, not just NIO, but then Onvo and Firefly as those come out and expand. I think that's the key for the global market. Anyway, we'll see how that goes. I think it makes sense to continue to focus on the Chinese market, which is by far the most important for NIO. Learning agility is what I call it. I think that William Li is aware of things that are going to, let's say, in different regions or countries look different and be adopted more or less well based on the users, the consumers, and yes, things like power swap stations. So anyway, I wanted to talk about that. Probably went on too long, but no worries. I'll create timestamps for this since it'll be a longer video to make it easier for the viewers to get through. And I've been sitting on this for a little while, so let's talk about it. March 3rd through the 9th, insurance registration data. I really wasn't concerned about whatever these numbers were going to be. The reason being, Onvo, with the goal of 20,000 deliveries in this month of March, the third full week for Onvo. So 3,000 between the two brands, NIO and Onvo for that week, March 3rd through the 9th. But this is the chart, and the trend in what we've seen from Onvo is the third full week in a single or in the individual months rather, is when we see the biggest uptick on the numbers. And so that third week in this month of March would be represented by, I think, around March 18th or the 20th, sort of that week. And so that's where I'll be looking to see a big number, hopefully a bigger number than this, maybe even a much bigger number than that, 4,200, which represents the single biggest weekly data for Onvo that we've seen to date. But anyway, that's me looking ahead. And again, looking back, but also ahead, recognizing the trend that we've seen from Onvo. We'll see how that plays out. This beauty is going to start, well, this is the estimation. I like that Arthur Shen, shout out to him, posting this, but suggesting that deliveries will start on March 28th. Typically, it's the 28th of the month when NIO does these deliveries. The guesstimate, and I really wouldn't be surprised, not disagreeing with Arthur. I do think based on what we've seen, again, from the history of NIO with when they release their vehicles, the deliveries on the 28th makes sense, but I also won't be surprised if they get some out before then. And so maybe we see that represented in the monthly numbers or the weekly numbers before we get the end of the month numbers. Anyway, and we may get more from the earnings call from William Li on that. Very much looking forward to that and what he has to say. How is NIO doing with NIO and Onvo through this point? And it's still early in the year. Really, the first quarter is the one that I pay the least attention to on the delivery side of things for NIO. I'm much more interested in what things look like as far as, let's say, power swaps and the energy play and some of those things. And I didn't even get that queued up, but there are incentives now for battery swapping that are going to, I think, be coming even beyond Hefei and Shanghai and China. So that is going to be further encouraging partners to get involved with battery swap. Also, more partners have models that they're going to be starting to sell later in this year of 2025. So a lot of positive things ahead for NIO and niostock. I believe that we will see a significant uptick with the stock price of NIO in this year of 2025. But I'll have to talk about that in another video, because for this one, I'm still sitting here on this tab as I talk and drone on. So both brands, even in spite of some folks suggesting they're not happy with the numbers for delivery or insurance registration from NIO and Onvo, and yet they're both still ranking. And this isn't just the battery electric vehicle. This is across all NEV brands. So new energy vehicles, this includes, let's say, the Li Autos. The majority of their sales obviously are extended range EVs, and that type of thing, essentially hybrids. So again, I just think NIO is very well positioned. And with respect to the highest, and again, this is another tab that I haven't set up. I already had way too much and knew this was going to be a longer video, so I didn't want to put too much. I'll have to come back with another video and cover some of these other things a little more in depth. But the majority of sales in the highest price sub-segmented part of the market in China remain with ICE or gas vehicles, and specifically the brands BMW, Audi, Mercedes. And yet NIO is outselling all of them combined with just BEVs. So as we see more market penetration and that shift a little bit more, I do think NIO is well positioned, especially with, I think the ET9 is going to make waves and turn a lot more eyes and attention to NIO and the brand itself, the premium brand, NIO, I should say. And then we'll see what happens with the sub brands. I'm stoked. I'm excited. So drop it in the comments. I want to hear from other people. Let me cut this thing off because I talk way too much. I feel like I talk way too much. So anyway, have a great day or night whenever you see this. I'll see y'all again very soon.